to the Transcript. This is season 3, episode 1, and today I'm joined with
Yemi.
Hey, I'm Dami.
Hey, I'm Danny.
And today we'll be discussing When They See Us. Now, if you haven't watched When They See Us, it's a Netflix film, a true depiction of a story of 5 boys who were wrongfully arrested, interrogated, and convicted of a crime that they did not commit in New York City, I think in 1989. And so I'm guessing everyone's watched it here?
Yeah. Well,
cool.
Eventually I got through it. I had to pause, take a break, and come back. Yeah.
As did I. So I want to take you back to the first episode, during the interrogation scene. Tell me your thoughts about how, what you thought they went through, and your initial feelings when you watched those scenes.
Madness, man. Yeah, I think that's the only thing I can really describe it as. I think the most touching part about it was the fact that these are just a couple of guys who are extremely young, ranging between the age of 14 to 16.
I think it was even 13. I think
13. The youngest one was 13. So yeah, youngest one being 13. It's kind of like, I mean, like back in the day kind of thing, when you're young, you're just out with your friends, kind of not doing anything bad or anything like that, but you're just kind of chilling, you know, it's just what you do. You're at a park or whatever, and it's just the way everything's kind of going down. Like when I was watching it, I was trying to picture myself in that position, kind of thinking like, I'll be baffed. I can't imagine what or how they must have been feeling at the time. But you kind of just, you go along with it, right? When the police arrest you or whatever, you don't even know what to say, you don't know what to ask, you just kind of, you go along with it. So yeah, as I was watching it, I just thought, even in that moment, like, this is absolutely crazy what's going on, because these guys don't even know how to even legally defend themselves.
Anyone else?
Do you know what was difficult for me? I think because I knew the story and I knew how it ends, like seeing them go about their everyday life, you know, kissing their loved ones goodbye, I don't know, getting chicken and chips from the shop, you know, with a girl, and just knowing how their futures were never going to be the same again. I think that was what was really difficult for me. And just seeing how, what was really interesting as well, it was the differences in the family structures. Already you could kind of see, you know, I can't remember the Latino guy, got his Hispanic guy, Raymond, and his relationship with his dad, and you know, his dad was really quick to come to his defense, you know, like with his family and trying to do his best for his family. And then the other gentleman, Antron, and his relationship with his dad. So you very quickly kind of saw the different dynamics, you know, of the different families, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, it was hard to watch because I knew how the story was going to end.
Yeah, walk me through your thoughts or feeling, if you had any thoughts or feelings towards law enforcement at that time watching.
At what point of the show?
The interrogation.
The interrogation.
Yeah. So what was your thought towards police and people in power in your country? Now, what was when you're watching that episode?
It's a lot of mixed kind of opinions, because the first one I was asking myself is, could this have happened to a non-minority group, right? Yeah. And I thought to myself, it could have, right? It was a witch hunt. They were trying to put the crime on a particular demographic. That could have been working class, you know, not educated white people. It happened to be working class black people. Because for me, it was kind of like, how can you dehumanize the children that much when you could actually do those things to them? And obviously race has a part to play with that. But then what I was really surprised was that one of the police officers was Hispanic, and Raymond's Hispanic. He was speaking the language to Raymond and to his grandmother, but he still did what he did. So race can't be the underlying factor. I think it has to be the kids were vulnerable, the families were vulnerable, they lacked education, they lacked awareness of the legal rights. The men in the family, I don't know.
We're going to get talking about that. I was going to ask this. So hold on, let me clarify. So you're saying it wasn't racially charged?
I don't think that was the underlying factor. I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But can you be racist against your own race?
Yeah. You can't be racist. I don't think it's a matter of him. You need to remember that the Hispanic police officer is part of a wider system. We're talking about systemic racism. So if if institutionally you are part of an organisation that is racist, it's a mob mentality. You have to. That's the culture of the Feds. So he was just acting how he was expected to act, and then he was also acting in with his professional obligation. Yeah. So the rest of his teammates, they were all behaving that way towards the children, and he was also just behaving that way as well. I don't know if I'm articulating this properly, but I think to say that it wasn't about race is just, I just don't think it doesn't take into account every other factor that points to the fact that actually it was about race.
I think I'm actually in support of Danny's point. I hear what you're saying, but I think you've missed the significant point of it being a system that is literally against minorities in this. So each of those police officers just make up like parts of that system. So there's a part in I don't know if it's episode 1 or 2 where a black officer comes out and he's like, they didn't find the DNA, it didn't match, but he didn't say anything either. And even the police officers like looked at him like we know it didn't match. But at that point, he could have equally spoken up. But you could even see the emotion that he felt like, they're not going to say anything. They're not going to do anything about the fact that the evidence is it doesn't match. But I also do think that a massive part of it is an element of power. And I think we've seen this not only in the US, but we see it in the UK as well. In the way police officers don't like disrespect. And even if you are being respectful, they just want to get to a point against you where they're exerting a level of power that strikes fear into you.
So let's now discuss Antron and Raymond's father during the interrogation. They made certain decisions to go along with the police. Walk me through your thoughts on their decisions and what they may have been battling with in their own heads.
I'm really struggling with this. I'm not a parent yet, and I obviously it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, you shouldn't have done that. I would never do that to my kids. I genuinely believe, God forbid, I found myself in that situation, I wouldn't tell my son to confess to something. But I do think that he was acting because he thought that was genuinely the best thing. I don't know. Like, I don't think it was like, I'm just gonna sabotage or sacrifice my son. I think he was like saying, okay, you're young, you ride the birds, you'll get out, you'll get over it, as opposed to he knew he didn't have the resources to fight this system, this power.
Well, yeah, they actually, I think they made a decision because they had promised them they would go home. I'd be able to take my 13, 14, 15-year-old boy home.
Yeah, I guess, so everyone would know that there's consequences to confessing to a crime regardless of your age or
But I don't remember the full facts, but I don't think any of them confessed to the rape apart from Corey.
But they confessed to taking part in whatever event had gone on, right? And they knew that the main topic of discussion at that point was the rape. I do believe that obviously the police were very manipulative, but even still as a father, if my son is looking at me telling me, listen, Dad, I didn't do anything, bro, then my son didn't do anything. What would you mean? Nah. And
Antron's father looked like he was facing previous... Yeah. He had obviously spent time in jail. Yeah. He was facing... I guess he was being posed with the question of, it's either you or your son.
Yeah.
We're going to ruin your life, you'll lose your job, or we'll take your son. Is there any empathy or sympathy towards... Do you feel any empathy or sympathy towards Antron's father or Raymond's father? Yeah, I'm keen to hear from you.
I think... what do we do with empathy? It's like,
bro, what do we do with empathy?
It's like, what do we actually do? Okay, I can empathize with him. Okay, what next?
Yeah.
How do we stop it happening to the next family?
Yeah.
Right? So empathy isn't the solution. Or the diagnosis. I just think the diagnosis was lack of education, previous history of the law, fear of authority, and he's a broken man. That man was already broken before those events happened. Look how easily they crushed him. They took him out of the room, spoke to him for 20 seconds. in there telling his kid to confess to a rape.
He was pleading, but like the way he was pleading with the police was.
He literally went in the room and banged the table, telling his son, "Listen, boy, confess now, so I'm not going back."
To be fair, one thing I will like again. This leads to the whole empathy thing. I'm not saying I don't feel sorry for him or the circumstance. I do, right? I understand that based on what they came into that situation with,
context.
that was all that was going to happen.
Yeah,
like they had no, do you know
what
I mean? They just didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And not knowing is not great, but it has consequences, right? Ignorance has consequences. Yeah. My thing was just that, like, the one thing I will admit is that I believe he was afraid that if they don't confess, that something worse could happen to his son.
That's what
So I could see that in his eyes, right? That he was thinking, listen, they could just kill you in the prison cell, bro. Like,
and you don't know what happened to the dad in prison as well.
Yeah.
So maybe that could have added to his fear, because the way he was moving, like, there's no way I'm going back to that place ever. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, in order for you to basically sacrifice your son.
Yeah. So based on what you just said, he sacrificed his son to avoid him going through that again.
Yeah.
I can't lie. I'm riding the bird for my son. Like, I'm going back, because, especially if we're speaking in the context of his dad knowing what prison's like, X, Y, and Z, knowing that your son is 13, 14 years old, knowing what the effect it's going to have on his life in terms of his prospects, family, everything, knowing that your son is literally at the beginning of his life. I'm doing everything I can in my power to protect my son from going into that prison, especially with experience. I don't care what anyone says to me at that point. We will fight the case, we'll see what happens, kind of thing. But if someone comes up to me and says, listen, it's you or your son, bro, I don't know how I can look at my son and be like,
bro, you need to write this one.
You gotta go for me. Like, there's no way.
I don't think that's the choice he felt like he was facing.
So what choice do you feel like he was facing?
I think he in his mind was like, okay, we can either say what they want. You're underage, so you get limited time. You get out by the time you're 22. That's what he's thinking in his head, right? And he's thinking it's going to be juvenile, blah blah blah. It's not going to be that bad. That's what he's thinking. Or the alternative is that anything can happen.
Yeah.
So anything can happen means that I could go home, come back, and you're dead in the prison cell. Like, I think that's what he's thinking in his head, right?
Okay.
Because he made a point. I can't remember the exact words he used, but he says you haven't seen nothing yet. You haven't experienced life yet. You don't know what's really at stake. There was a moment when he said that to his son, and that's when his son, and he was repeating it, and then that's when his son kind of
went back and
because the dad was kind of saying that's what the dad used. The dad used authority on the son. He said, "Trust me, I know what's at stake. Listen to what I'm telling you. Do it." And that's why the son did it, because it was like, okay, my dad is telling me something. I don't know what he's talking about, but let me just do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. In terms, I don't think the son had any kind of. If I'm the son in that situation and my dad's telling me to do that, there's nothing you can do at the end of the day. But I mean, the dad didn't even know whether his son was facing a conviction at that time. So his dad was asking him to confess to being involved or whatever. So I mentioned that point because obviously you're talking about the fact that the dad probably didn't know what could happen to what they could do to him and all this kind of stuff. But his dad didn't even know he was facing a conviction. He just knew that he had to confess to something for me to get off for whatever I need to do. Point of view, maybe it's in terms of the family support and stuff. I'm the main bread earner, whatever, breadwinner, whatever. Yeah. But even still, I'm struggling to be able to side with him in that situation and say, yeah, do you know what?
I think that's fine though. That struggle.
I'm not saying you should side with him.
Yeah, I think that struggle you have is fine.
Yeah.
I think that leads on to my next question. So we have 5 boys. The home life of those boys are not ideal. So broken homes, there's missing fathers, there's mothers, incarcerated fathers, there's missing. I don't know Raymond's mother. I don't think they described or explained where she was, or maybe she passed away. I'm not sure. And what does that say about the strong mothers that the boys had? Let's talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting how the mums were just there, you know, irrespective even of some of their own personal issues that they were having. Because we're talking about one of them had, you know, issues with substance misuse. I think it's Corey's mum. They were all just there riding for their kids, irrespective, come what may. And I think it's always difficult because in any situation, it's so easy for us to sit here and say, oh yeah, you know, they had, you know, missing fathers and incarcerated fathers and issues with substance misuse and broken homes, domestic violence, whatever the case may be. But these things actually do impact on the mental health and well-being and understanding of a child. And even the fact that they were out at that time, like in the park, wilding, these are the things that we see here in the UK. If you don't have strong family units, children are left to their own devices. Who knows? Maybe if those situations, issues that their families were facing weren't there, maybe they would have been at home that evening.
Or even the fact that parents had to work
at night, exactly.
Yeah, late hours.
Something I wanted to kind of touch on, which links to what you just mentioned, is for me. So earlier I said I don't think race was the underlying factors for why things happened. So what I mean by that is, of course, race has got a part to play, right? No, I mean it's obvious, right? But my thing was like, when I was watching it, I just kept thinking, what could have happened differently? If we accept that racism exists, the police were racist, they're always going to be racist. What could have happened differently? And the only thing that could have happened differently are the parents.
Everything.
No, I disagree. Hold on.
I
think we're dealing with. I think we're dealing with. Let's look at the entire context. We're dealing with a country, a nation that has a racist history, and a particular way of looking at, which is obviously indicative of the title, looking at black people. So if you're posing the question, does it pan out differently if it's a group of young white males? I think yes. They're not rushing to convict. And the media,
to go that far.
The media
don't even have to change the race.
The media, the general public, probably don't convict them as quickly as possible, as quickly as they did. These five.
So that's not the point I was making.
Fine.
The point I'm making is that if I was the parent of Antron, would that have happened? If you were Antron's father, would that happen? No, it wouldn't.
Fair enough. Because you're right.
The first thing you would have done, you'd have said, "Don't speak."
Yeah.
The second thing you would have done is, we don't have a lawyer in the room.
Yeah.
The third thing you would have done is, you would have left the prison to go and work your shift to come back.
Yeah.
The fourth thing you've done is, you wouldn't have put your mother that can't speak English there. Like, there's so many basic mistakes that allowed any of these things to happen. And we have to mention these things, because if we don't mention these things, we're always going to be in a vulnerable position. These children were vulnerable, that's why it happened. The parents were vulnerable, that's why it happened. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, kind of give a shout out to Yusuf's mom.
Absolutely.
Because she was the one person that I thought, oh, my behaviour would be similar to hers. Right? Everyone else, I was just like, what are they doing? But she was the one person I was like, yeah, come on, go a little bit, one step forward, one step further. And I think when she confronted the head of the investigation, you know, the blonde lady, the KKK lady, I don't know if it was deliberate, but she tried to kind of humanize her son. She was like, he's a kid. Left him in a room full of these men. What's wrong with you? And you could see that the blonde woman couldn't really even connect to that statement. She couldn't even. She was. I don't know. I just feel like in order to do the things that happened, you have to really desensitize yourself to the boy's humanity.
But that's the whole
and that was the thing that was so shocking to me.
So, off the back of that, what part does the media play? What part does the media have influence over the general thoughts and feelings towards young black males? Specifically, let's look at the exonerated five.
I think the media plays a massive part. One of the reasons that we're having this conversation now is because of the media. At the end of the day, this case was first brought to light, 20 years ago? In 1980? 20? 30 years?
30 years.
Sorry, 30 years ago. I hope that's right anyway, 1989, and we're only discussing it now, and the only reason we're discussing it is because a black lady went behind the camera and decided to bring this to light. So I think that just demonstrates how much the media does have an influence. This would have been a narrative that would have been buried like anyone else's. They would have got their payout and no one would have kind of batted an eyelid. How many times do you see in a paper, so-and-so wrongly convicted of, for how many years has now been released, but no one discusses it unless it's in the media live. So I think specifically in regards to this case, definitely the media has highlighted, and you even saw it during the documentary, the amount of the fact that they had the name CP5 was generated by the media, and that carried on with them into prison. I remember when the prison guard went up to Corey was it the last prison? One of the last prisons anyway, and he said, you don't understand how long I've been waiting to see one of the CP5 walk into my prison. Where's he got CP5 from? It's from the media, do you get what I mean? So the media has a massive influence, and it's especially in the case of where a jury's deciding, it plays a massive part. And there's something that someone once said to me, that even when the media plays such a massive part, that even when you have been found not guilty of a crime, as soon as you've been accused by the media, you're automatically guilty. Because you can walk free, but people still see you as that guy that was accused of raping so-and-so. And a lot of the people would hold what the media saw at that point as the perception of how that case should have gone. Even if you did get off, maybe the prosecution wasn't as strong as it should have been. Maybe you just had a good lawyer. Yeah, and that's my opinion.
Just to go off what Danny was saying, I guess my question would be, what is the responsibility of the media? Because I think sometimes we feel like we forget that they will often sensationalize things just in order to get people to pick up their papers. And I know that, to be convicted of rape, which is like one of the most heinous crimes that you can ever commit, I think probably next to something like paedophilia, and have this narrative that's wrapped around these innocent people, and printing sound bites from someone like Donald Trump, I just think it's just irresponsible. And just another point on the media that I thought was really interesting was that I remember when it happened about a couple of years ago, Oprah did this. She did this interview with Miley, I forgot what her name is, the victim. And even though she didn't herself say that she thought that the exonerated five were guilty, the line of questioning sounded very much like she was very accepting of, the victim's story. And now that it's come out that they've been exonerated, she hasn't made any mention to the fact that she interviewed this victim, and that it's like, I just don't understand how. It's just interesting, should I say, how Oprah is the one that has interviewed and given these men a platform, and it's like, now you're an ally. Now you feel like it's now you feel like they're the exonerated five. But then that furthers the point that, again, the media, Oprah probably heard the story and believed that they were guilty just like everybody else.
We have to be very, very careful, right? Because none of us are lawyers, none of us are prosecutors, none of us know the law, right? Okay, you are, right? So you're the only person that could look at the evidence and like reasonably have an opinion that could be true, that could be like a real life opinion. We're going to be biased. We're lay people, right? And the reason I'm touching on that is because I think we have to see things clearly. What is the media? The media is a business. They're not a government agency. They're not subsidized by the government. They're a business that has a profit and loss account at the end of the year. So because of that, we cannot put any moralistic judgments on them. They're a business. The way you don't put moralistic judgments on McDonald's. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't expect them to give you healthy food, right? Yeah, they might have regulations around them in order to control them, but what media is, what printing stories is printing stories. It's selling stories that people will buy. So we have to always remember that they don't have any loyalty to society or anything like that. That's not what they're there for. They're there to sell a product. And so once we see the news through that lens, then we can protect ourselves against the influence. because we're not expecting it to be balanced. We're not expecting it to be righteous. You know.
I think that the problem is seeing it through that lens. Not everyone
Does
want to see through that lens. Cool. What's the one key takeaway from watching and digesting When They See Us?
When I read a story about somebody who's been wrongly in prison for X amount of years, it's not dehumanising it anymore. I think I had gotten to a point where I'd kind of seen so many articles and stuff where somebody served a sentence for something they didn't do, but I've just kind of detached myself from it because I couldn't foresee that reality. But the documentary helped to bring that to light. I think that's what it mainly did for me.
I think, first of all, just to big up Ava DuVernay, number one, and just the importance of using your voice, using your power, and telling your narrative, being in control of your narrative. I think that, like what Daniel was saying earlier about, if, like Ava, she didn't use her platform, then they probably would have gone down, you know, as, like, the story wouldn't have, the reason why we're having this conversation is because someone decided to use their voice. And yeah, that for me has just been really powerful. Like, use your voice, don't be afraid to tell your story. Yeah.
For me as an individual, my thing is about protection. How can we protect our families against this kind of occurrence? How can we protect our community? And so for me, it's about providing services, because one of the things I realized was that I can't remember what family it was, but it had like a local leader pay for the.
That was useless.
Right.
Useless.
And I remember at that point, like you hear that people do these kind of things, like they work within the community, and I know this might sound really silly, but I'm gonna say it. You know, watching that series made me realize how important it is to have those types of people, and it made me think, why am I not that type of person? Why am I not contributing? Why am I not, you know, raising money? I'm sure there's someone in our community right now that's being falsely accused of something.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Transcript. Stay tuned for more content.